Star Wars After Party.
I wanna buckle up, baby.
With your host, Tyler
This is getting out of hand.
and Cameron.
Now there are two of them. I like to blow things up. Because I like to blow things up. My allegiance is to the Republic. To democracy.
I can bring you in warm, or I can bring you in cold.
What chance do we have? The question is what choice?
This party's over.
I don't think so.
Take a seat. We would be honored if you would join us.
Welcome one, welcome all to the after party. We're glad you're here. We're honored you would join us. It was quite the road to get to this episode. We'll talk about it. I'm really interested to dig into this because on first glance, I get it. I felt it. It didn't seem like there was a whole lot going on, particularly in comparison to the last episode, but man, I gotta say, there's a lot. So hold on tight. You might want to buckle up, baby. We got some good stuff for you. When I say we, Tyler Bodkins, I like to blow things up because I like to blow things up. And if it's your first time joining us, well, things are going to be a little different. Let me explain. I'd mentioned that it's been a bit of a road. Look, we had some scheduling conflicts. It happens, and we were trying to make it work, and there was a moment where I was going to get this mobile rig going, where I grabbed what is like a 10-year-old laptop that the keyboard and the mouse don't even work, and I was trying to get it all together so that I could have a mobile rig to go meet up with Cameron and do some recording, and it just didn't work out. Cameron's not here this week, and I do have a word from Cameron. I'm going to play it here, and we do get Cameron's thoughts, so it's happening. And it's not just going to be me. I'm going to let Cameron kind of break some stuff down for you, and then we'll introduce who we've got with us today. A very special guest.
Yo, Star Wars After Party, Acolyte, Episode 6. We're about to get into it. I am obviously not with us this evening to podcast with you all. With it being summer and having a kid and traveling and playing gigs, sometimes things just don't line up how you like them to. So I'm not going to be joining you guys tonight, but I will be listening alongside of you tomorrow or whenever you pull out your podcast and check it out. I'm actually about to watch episode 6 right now. My thoughts will be incoming shortly. But in the meantime, insolence. We are pirates. We don't even know what that means. It's Kayla Bodkins.
A surprise to be sure, but a welcome one. Kayla's here.
Hello, Star Wars After Party listeners. Apologies. You were expecting Cameron. Why am I here? Cameron had some scheduling conflicts, but we're going to make it work. I'm going to do my best to honor the podcast here.
Did we just get Cameron doing a Hondo reference on the intro? I hit you with a Palpatine. You come back with apologies, which is the Major Domo from Book of Boba Fett, and you followed up with the Darth Maul Clone Wars Season 7. Wow. All right. We're deep on the Star Wars references. That's how we're rolling in this house. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad I got someone to talk with, and we'll introduce you and we'll talk a little bit. Obviously, this is my wife, Kayla, if you haven't put those two things together. Kayla generally right there with Cameron and I as we were watching Star Wars, and so she's kind of been this force behind the pod that's kind of just been hanging around, you know. She's like the cosmic force of the podcast, and now she's become the living force. She's here with us. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to talk about it with you. We just did our second watch through of episode 6, and I think, you know, just a slight spoiler, we got more out of it the second time for sure. There's a lot more than what was at first on the surface. Let me say this to anyone listening, anyone watching. I watched the episode last night, and my thoughts were something along the lines of this. Wow, like I knew it wasn't going to be like episode 5, but I kind of feel a bit let down with this episode. This might be my least favorite episode of the season. I don't think it's bad, but there's what am I going to talk about? What are we going to talk about? I just don't know. And I knew that I was going to watch it again this morning, and once we were in it the second time, I was like, oh, there's some great stuff in here to talk about. So if you're feeling a little down in the episode, maybe you should pause and watch again. Or at the very least, you'll hear what we have to say, and maybe it'll open up some things for you. And yeah, we are going to hear from Cameron. We're going to get some stuff from him. And I'm very looking forward to seeing what the audience has to say about this episode as this week progresses. Let's talk a little bit first. Generally, when we have someone new on the pod, Kayla, everyone knows to some degree me and Cameron and the way that we sort of got into Star Wars. We've shared a lot of our background and history. When we had Jim on a few episodes back, he did the same. So I want to hear from you. What is your history with Star Wars? What's your Star Wars fandom look like?
Well, I guess first of all, I don't necessarily identify as a Star Wars fan.
Okay.
Per se.
We'll break that down.
Yeah. I guess I grew up not really with the same Star Wars upbringing that so many Star Wars fans have. I maybe watched the prequels, the original trilogy, like one time.
Okay.
A piece.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Did you like them?
Yeah, they were fine.
But you weren't like posters on the wall.
No, of no like import.
Reading the
really.
Books and collecting the magazines and no. Okay.
No,
okay.
and I don't read the books now. I don't read the comics. Yeah.
So you wouldn't necessarily call yourself a Star Wars fan, quote unquote. It's not a way that you think of yourself, but you saw all of the original movie, and this is all before you and I met, by the way, right? So you watched all these growing up. Let's flash forward to 2015 and kind of get caught up, once, all the new Star Wars started rolling out in earnest. The Force Awakens. You were there opening night with me, right?
Yes.
So you watched Force Awakens opening night. Rogue One was next, opening night.
Mm-hmm.
Last Jedi, opening night, we were there.
Yeah.
Solo, we were there opening night.
Yep.
Rise of Skywalker, we were there opening night. So you've watched all the Star Wars movies on opening night, like Thursday first showing, you're there.
Yeah.
Interesting. Have you seen all of Clone Wars?
Yes. You made sure of that.
Have you seen all of Rebels?
Yes.
Okay. Mando, Boba Fett, Ahsoka, Andor, Obi-Wan, Tales of the Jedi, Tales of the Empire.
Don't forget Bad Batch.
How could? Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. Don't forget Bad Batch. And of all these series that you've watched, you generally like them?
Oh yeah, watched them multiple times.
Okay. I think you might be a Star Wars fan.
It's contagious.
It's contagious. That's great. So let this be a word of encouragement to any Star Wars fans. If your significant other isn't a fan, there's still hope. There's always hope, So yeah, that's cool. I remember when we first started watching Star Wars, it definitely did feel a little bit like, sure, I'll tag along to this thing.
Yeah.
But now it's like, I feel like if I were to try to watch a new episode of Star Wars without you, it would be a little contentious. Like,
I would be disappointed.
Exactly.
Sure.
So you're right here with me. Maybe not. You didn't start your own Star Wars podcast. You don't read all the comics necessarily, but
I don't know the EU.
Right. You don't know the EU. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of EU out there. I only know some of it, but yeah, but even like, I feel like you've even sat down and watched a lot of the games with me and stuff as I'm playing games.
Oh, yeah.
I know you're excited for Outlaws, for KVS. And so, yeah, we're really excited. It comes out on her birthday.
So excited.
So cool. Kay is going to be playing as Kay on her birthday. I didn't mean to rhyme, but here we are.
On my birthday? Really?
On your birthday. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Midnight release, right? That's what we do. But that said, okay, I feel like that explains a little bit of where you're coming from. Now, catch us up on the Acolyte. People have been listening to me and Cameron talk about the Acolyte for the last month or so, And again, if it's your first time joining us, you can go back. It's on our YouTube. Hello, YouTube watchers. It's in our our podcast feed, so you can go back and see our thoughts. Generally, we've been pretty positive. We've really enjoyed it. Dare I say, I've greatly enjoyed it. There's a lot going on in the Acolyte that I've been loving. So I want to hear from you. Talk to me about your general thoughts of the season up to episode 6, and then we'll sort of save episode 6 for right after that.
Oh, I mean, I've been really enjoying it.
Okay.
I like it. Maybe not like my top series, of course, but really intriguing stuff that they're exploring in the past several episodes. I love May's character and Qimir as well. I think they're all very interesting.
So the Darksiders are
I
more...
guess. I don't know. They're very interesting characters to me.
What is that? What do you think?
Oh, I don't know. I just think they're pretty cool.
Just is it the complexity of
probably so, and the mystery surrounding their backstories, probably as well, and their motivations. And then it's kind of like a new thing that I feel like I have not really explored through Star Wars.
Focusing more on the villains than the heroes.
Yeah, well, and the villains not necessarily being just like villains. Like you get to see more sides to it than that. Hopefully, I'm hoping that that's what we'll get more of. Sure. As well. But I've really been enjoying the episodes up to this point. That last episode last week was a doozy.
It was wild,
to
man.
say the least, yeah.
It was wild.
Very exciting.
You were there with us as we were, Jackie!
Yeah,
Jackie!
oh my God.
We were so excited as she was doing her thing.
Yeah, I was heartbroken.
Yeah, are you still kind of...
I am still reeling from that loss.
Yes.
Yord was sad too, but yeah, Jackie, you will be missed. I mean, yeah, it was tragic. It was really all so sudden.
It was all pretty rough. I'm just playing up my Yord.
Yeah, so I'm still recovering
my Yord
from
hate.
that.
yeah. So overall, favorable review from you.
Oh yeah, definitely. I've been really intrigued, really invested in. Like it's kind of like, ooh, what are they gonna reveal next? It's been kind of like a mystery. Yeah, that we're all trying to unravel. Almost like detective style, putting the pieces together, which is very interesting. I was kind of a little like disappointed with the initial watch as well of this episode. But I think that's just, again, coming out of the last episode. Right. Has to settle things down a little bit. Sure. It's a little bit of setup as well. But once we kind of watched through and saw a little more of the details going on, it seems like there's a lot underneath what's happening.
I agree.
To talk about.
Yes, that does seem to be the case. So, well, it'll be exciting to get into that. You mentioned, again, just trying to kind of like let people get to know you. You mentioned that the Acolyte's up there for you, but it's not your favorite series. Do you have a favorite Star Wars series?
Oh, okay. I haven't put them in order.
Okay, that's fine. Well, let's
hierarchically
talk it out.
Okay, Bad Batch is beautiful.
Oh, Bad Batch up there.
It's up there. Like definitely top 3.
Yeah.
I really like Ahsoka. Ahsoka show. That was great. Yes. Good question. I'm not really like a movies fan. Like, I mean,
you like the movies.
Movies are great.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wouldn't put them in the tops. Mando, of course, would probably be
Mando.
Also.
So Mando, Ahsoka, and Bad Batch would be your top 3. Those are great shows. Yeah, people are going to say not Andor, but you did enjoy Andor.
Andor was great. It just doesn't hit top 3 for me.
To your taste, it's Mando, it's Ahsoka, it's Bad Batch. Cool. And you, of course, pretty big fan of Clone Wars.
Oh yeah, definitely Ahsoka.
Yeah, Ahsoka. Great. All right. Well, I feel like as far, for me, of course, we're always watching this stuff. There's a lot of ways that I would consider you. I don't always consider your Star Wars fandom in my model of Kayla Bodkins, but I do feel like that does jive with what I have observed. And honestly, those are some of my favorite things too. Ahsoka is probably my favorite. Again, favorite doesn't always mean what you might think is critically the best or whatever, but I don't really like to think critically. That's okay. I like to critically think. I don't like to think critically. Yeah, I'm going to say it like that. I like that. And Ahsoka is up there for me big time. It scratches a lot of the itches. Again, in very similar ways to what the Acolyte is doing. There is a certain... There can be a certain philosophical bend to Star Wars. Of course, George was doing that. And to me, while there are very intriguing narratives and very intriguing things happening in a lot of the shows, of course, like with Andor, it's there in Bad Batch, it's there in a lot of this stuff. When it comes to the more, I would say, like overt philosophical exploration, Ahsoka and the Acolyte do that as good as anything since George Lucas, in my opinion. And so I think that that's why I would be inclined to put those near the top of my favorite shows as well. So yeah. All right. Well, we're about to get into the episode proper. I will say this, so much listener feedback this week. I don't have any clips to play. I still need you guys to send some clips. Come on. I got Cameron. Yeah, that'll work. I'm excited to hear from Cameron. But yeah, just a lot of emails. I spoke with a nice new listener. I believe his name is Marco. Good to have you on, Marco. And then there were a few other people that, just through YouTube, through Instagram have been chatting with us, and it's just been really, really cool. I will say that like our last YouTube video got absolutely the most views of any of our YouTube stuff. Our podcast episode was like our second largest downloaded episode compared to the 2 weeks before that. So like, you guys are really helping us out a lot. We did get a couple more of those 5 stars, and that helped. And so, yeah, I just really thank you. Really appreciate it. Again, yeah, it's cool for the podcast to grow and get some numbers, and it's nice in the sense of, yeah, you see the growth, and it's nice when you work hard on something and you see that happen. But again, to me, the results, the benefit of that is just being able to hear from more people. It's just been really interesting. I've had some really great conversations. Also received a lot of like negative comments on the YouTube channel, and that's really cool too, because it does give an interesting look at kind of like what other people are thinking. It's okay if not everyone, like, we're going to lay out what we liked about this episode. You might still think it's a snooze fest, and that's okay. We can have that differing point of view, and it's been fun. And I do want to say this, not trying to be too soapboxy. These are things I'm learning, especially through the Acolyte, where it does feel like the fan base might be a little bit more contentious than usual. Been having conversations with fans about that. We've talked about that on our show some, and I just want to like briefly update, and then I promise we're getting right into the episode. One thing I've noticed is when people have been coming on our YouTube channel and leaving negative comments, and generally they're not directed towards us. They're generally just, this show sucks or whatever. One thing I would say is that it seems like what you take in and what you put out is what sort of like comes back around. And so when you receive these negative comments, I had a listener had written in and said that it was a little bit disheartening to see all the negativity and wondering what it was stemming from. Could it be this thing or that thing? And the truth is, I think a lot of those negative comments stem from a lack of fulfillment in the commenter's life. I really do think that. Like, there's an old adage that out of the heart, the mouth speaks. And so if you have a negative, unfulfilled life that you're living, generally that can come out in comment or critique. It's just the way it is. This is something that happens. And what I've been trying to do, keyword, trying to do, is to make it so that whenever I do come into contact with those people, that I choose to err on the light side. What I mean by that is like understanding that this person spouting all of this negativity might be going through a lot of negative things. And if I can go light side here, then the trick would just be compassion. And just trying to treat it that way. Not trying to convince anyone that the show is great. Not trying to convince people that they should stop making negative comments. Instead, just kind of maybe like, hey, I understand you feel that way. Sometimes I don't like things too. And if I come back later, I might like it more. If you want to have a conversation, cool. If not, that's fine. Generally, they don't respond. And that's okay. my encouragement would just be that, to just try to meet it with the light side. Just understand that perhaps they're just going through something. It's something that happens. You can speak to that to some degree.
Well, I know. I think that's a nice way to approach it. Just because everybody's entitled to their opinions and everybody has different experiences with what they prefer to see in television and in Star Wars in general. So
yeah,
I think it's fair to meet those kinds of comments with some compassion.
Yes, and understanding. And it's not even, there's a wide range. Some of it is like, this show is stupid. Why, it can just be just a blanket, just kind of like almost an empty comment. It's like, have you actually watched the show? Some of them haven't. Others might be like, that I don't like, you can list a critique, and they could be valid. So it's all just like, hey, cool.
I mean, I'm not like 100% down with everything that's happening in every episode ever.
Same.
So, but I think it's more fun to kind of focus on the things that I find interesting.
I agree. Yeah.
Exciting.
Great. Well, that said, let's get into the episode.
You're listening to Star Wars After Party. We're honored that you would join us. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube for video and wherever you get your podcasts for audio. If you would like to help the pod grow, consider sharing with the Star Wars fans in your life. In addition, leaving 5 stars on Apple or Spotify, giving the video a like, or leaving a comment on YouTube are extremely helpful. Written reviews are the best way to help the podcast reach new listeners. We appreciate your support. Lastly, we want to hear from you. Record a voice memo on your phone and send it over to starwarsafterparty@gmail.com. Written email works too. Now, back to the after party.
Wait a minute. That was you. I have dubbed your droid there KB137.
Okay.
KB, of course, Kayla Bodkins 137 randomly being your favorite number. So that's KB137. That's the resident droid here at the after party. All right, so The Acolyte, Season 1, Episode 6. Teach Corrupt is the name of this episode. We'll talk about that. Written by Leslie Headland and Jocelyn Baio. Directed by Hanel M. Culpepper. Kayla, what are your opening thoughts?
Well, I kind of gave you the rundown on my first impression a little bit earlier. A little underwhelmed initially.
Right.
Later, very intrigued by the back and forth and the tension that's underneath everything that's going on in this episode, going back and forth between the pairings of Sol and May, and Osha and Qimir, and then even the Jedi investigating kind of what happened.
Sure, there's definitely a lot of tension there.
Yes,
because there's a lot of things being suggested,
right,
and some other things being subtly implied, and we'll speculate about what that means later.
Yeah. Definitely overall enjoyed it more with the rewatch.
There was a lot bubbling under the surface. Yes. And I think especially coming out of, this is kind of my general thoughts, coming out of last week's episode where everything was so overt, you're sort of in that mindset of like, where are we picking up? Is there going to be a fight in between May and Sol? Is there going to be a fight in between Osha and Qimir? Like, we're looking for all this overt action and we don't get it, but underneath it is that tension that you speak of.
So it's like the last episode was more like externally intense and this is more like internally.
Yes, I think
intense.
That's an important way for us to frame this episode as we discuss it, and it definitely seems like it's connecting to something that's coming up. So my general thoughts are very similar. At first it was kind of like, it seems like a bit of a slower episode. I wonder, but I've seen this happen with Star Wars shows before. Like sometimes you just need to get from A to B or go from A to C, and you need B to help you get there, I guess. And it's not always as exciting necessarily, but I do think that they are setting us up for another flashback episode next week. The same director that did episode 3, which was a flashback, is also doing episode 7.
Ooh, that's exciting.
Yes. So it does seem like, especially with, jump to the end, with Osha putting that helmet on and then everything sort of fading away, I imagine now the Force is going to show her what actually happened.
Oh my gosh. We're not even speculating yet.
Yeah, but I'm getting a little ahead of myself. How about this? Before we dig too far in the episode, let's see what Cameron Porter has to say.
Ooh.
All right, so initial thoughts on this episode, much slower pace. Well, significantly slower pace from last week, which at this point we're kind of familiar with that, with Star Wars doing now with the shows like Ahsoka and with Mandalorian. I feel like we got that a good bit, where we get a really intense episode followed by one that is much more calm, or almost like setting up for the next one. I feel like this episode was a really big setup for next week, so I'm hoping for an absolute banger next week. It's interesting how we're getting to see things play out through this swap of May and Soul, and then Osha and Qimir. I definitely got a dark vibe from Soul that I liked, especially when May wakes up after being hit with the stun blaster, and him leaving it with that very ominous, we have some talking to do. I'm curious as to whether or not that's going to be him telling what actually happened, or if he's going to try and manipulate her into thinking something happened that didn't. Additionally, the dynamic between Qimir and Osha is interesting. He definitely shows a lot of confidence in her curiosity about the dark side, especially with that line that he said about, or she said, "What, am I your prisoner?" And he says, "You're the one with the weapon, aren't you?" Just really confident in his ability to draw her in and know that she has interest in what he has been teaching May, or knowing that there's a dark side pull in her that he plans to exploit. My last note on this episode here was I like the reveal of the material that his helmet's made out of. I think it's cool that Cordonium silences all senses except for the Force, and that it's the same material used in the temple when younglings are training. It reminded me a lot of the helmet that Luke used in A New Hope to train with the little blaster droid, and then, he uses that same one with Grogu later on. But I need to look into that material a little bit more, because I'm curious if that material itself is also what causes lightsabers to deactivate when they hit it. We didn't really get much of an explanation on that as far as his arms, when they were hitting his arms. But I guess it would kind of make sense if we're thinking about Cordonium as being something that younglings are using to train with. It would make sense that they would be kind of safe for lightsaber training too when they're in the temple. So somebody doesn't accidentally, hit somebody in the head with a blade or something. So anyway, those are my thoughts on the episode. I thought it was really great. Tyler, Kayla, I'm super excited to hear what y'all have to say, and I will talk to you guys soon. Cameron out.
As Cameron listens to this, he's probably already corrected himself. And so just to throw it out there, he's saying Cordonium, he means cortosis, which little bit of behind the scenes is just another one of those tech difficulties. Cameron had sent me a message earlier, and basically there was just the file got corrupted. Like, it was just kind of messed up, and he said cortosis there. He knows it's cortosis. I'm just making sure everyone knows. Cordonium sounds like cortosis meets rhydonium, which was what Bill Burr kept talking about in that episode of The Believer in season 2 of Mando, which was a great episode. So yeah, I definitely want to speak to a lot of the things that Cameron's talking about. I will say this too: the cortosis. I hear where Cameron's coming from. I don't think that the actual visors that were used in the Jedi Temple were made out of cortosis. I think that he was just trying to say that, like, the fact that you can't see through them is what did that. I could be wrong. Cameron might be right, but that's the way that I took that. Is that because even like, later with Luke Skywalker, that's like a plastic thing he puts on his head. I think the cortosis is like the alloy. It was in, so last week I was like, is this like a High Republic thing? I kind of like remembered something like that. It's actually from Knights of the Old Republic, so old EU stuff. And you could use like a cortosis blade, and it could withstand. It was kind of essentially like Beskar. And so, yeah, it is the actual cortosis, because Cameron was asking about this, that is able to nullify the lightsaber blade. That, I believe, has been confirmed. I think that he probably had that alloy all throughout his garb there, which is why when he was hit with the stun blast, it stopped the energy from being able to impact him. So that's what I'm thinking about, with the cortosis. But so Cameron's like us. He kind of felt like it was a bit of a slower episode. Was there anything that he said that jumped out to you in particular?
Definitely agree with his his description of soul wrestling with something seemingly darker,
Yes.
more intense emotions.
Yes.
Which kind of came out pretty overtly in the last episode.
Right.
When he kind of just about lost it on Qimir. And Osha had to kind of step in.
We even see it in this episode. There's that scene where he kind of like, he like very angrily, hits the desk or whatever. And I tried to read his emotions after because he did soften, but the softening did not seem to speak to any sort of peace. It almost felt more like, and maybe this is where, women generally have a little bit more emotional intelligence than men. Maybe you can help me out here. It felt less like he was becoming at peace with his frustration and more like he was stuffing it down. I did not get the sense that he was being resolved in some kind of quote unquote good way. It seemed like a stuffing down of emotions.
Yeah, and I would agree with that interpretation as well. It kind of seems like it's been years and years of stuffing something down and telling himself that he has accepted certain events that maybe he's just been denying or stuffing.
Yeah, seems like. So, okay.
And now they're coming back up.
What's that?
And now they're coming back up
Well,
now, because I don't think that anger is just about the situation that happened. I think it's about all of those things that he's been trying to avoid.
That seems to be the way of things, is that it's always going to come back up. And I think that that's kind of one of those things with with what this show is trying to say. Is like these emotions are not going to simply dissipate into nothing. These things transform and they come back around. Let's talk about this idea of transformation and things coming back around. That seems to be what these episode titles are doing. There was a little bit of a dialogue, and we'll take it from the top here in a sec, but there's a little bit of dialogue in this episode a bit later on between Qimir and Osha, where they were talking about justice. It was a great thing there. So, and it was a callback to the first title. Qimir said, "In the heat of battle, it's justified, but a few hours later, it's vengeance." He kind of asked it like a question.
And he's talking about striking someone down.
Yes. This speaks to something that we'd actually mentioned a few weeks ago on the podcast. In the writings in the Tao Te Ching, there's this line. It says, "Beauty is called beauty because ugliness exists." That light and dark transform into each other. It's this idea of yin and yang, really, which again, this show seems to be all about. All the imagery with the witches, like it seems like it's teaching that idea. And so, what Qimir is saying here is that justice seems to transform into vengeance, right? Then you have the last two episodes were called Day and Night. Obviously, day transforms into night and night transforms into day.
Just a matter of like where you're at on the timeline.
It's just a matter of where you're at on the timeline. The idea of this episode being called, what was it? Teach Corrupt? Like that, again, like teachings can become corrupted. It is this thing. And then the corruption can teach you a lesson. Like these titles are meant to show that in this world of Star Wars, but I think it's a reflection of our world, that these things really do, as Obi-Wan Kenobi says, matter on your point of view. And that point of view can shift over time, just where you might be at. In the heat of battle, yeah. It's justified, but just a couple hours later, it's vengeance? Does that really make sense? And it's not saying that, or I'll say it like this, it's just as much saying there's nothing wrong with vengeance as it is saying that there is something wrong with justice. It's a very weird sort of thing. In other words, he's not, when he's saying it, you can take it like he's trying to justify vengeance, which is weird. But in a way, he might even be condemning the idea of justice, the idea that you think you can cut someone down and it would be just. Maybe it's not.
Well, and I think that is the point that he's trying to make to Osha, to get her thinking about these things. Like the Jedi have said that this is okay, this is justice.
Right.
But like if you really examine this, does it make sense on like a logical level?
Yeah, is it really
just trying to get her to consider those things.
Yes,
Poke holes
yes.
in her faith in the Jedi.
It's very interesting. These are not just like very simple questions. Even as I'm saying them, I'm picturing, generations and generations of no, justice is good. And it's like, yeah, no, I'm not inherently saying there's anything wrong with justice. It's just an interesting idea.
Well, and justice is a matter of perspective.
It is. One person's justice is another person's vengeance. And there was even, what was the, I don't have my phone with me. I'm trying to remember the name of the second episode, but it was a very similar kind of idea. And I wish I knew it because I would bet that it follows that idea of almost like a transformative kind. Oh, it was lost and found. That's what it was. Of course, you get lost so that you can get found, so that you can get lost. I mean, it really does all kind of speak to this like never ending thing that keeps going on and on and on. It's really interesting. So I love that. Let's start off at the very top of the episode. So we open up in Qimir's lair, and we dub these little creatures faux porgs.
Faux porgs.
Because they're not really porgs,
No.
but they're reminiscent.
They're the little cute creatures on the island.
They are. We'll talk about Qimir's lair. I want your thoughts, but I will say every planet has been named. This planet specifically is called Unknown Planet. So, are we thinking that this is Octo? Like, is it possible? I mean, I know they're not porgs. I'm assuming there was more than one island on the entire planet. Maybe this is the other side of the island that we didn't see. Maybe I'm just curious. And for those that maybe aren't like, well, Octo, that's of course it's the island that Luke had exiled himself to in The Last Jedi. It's the site of the first Jedi temple where the Jedi Prime, the original Jedi, essentially resided, I guess, and we will be getting a movie on that at some point. I'm curious what you think. Could that be Octo, or do you think it's somewhere different?
I don't think it has to be Octo.
Okay.
And there's no porgs. So
no porgs, no Octo. Is it that simple for you?
Yeah, it can be another place. That's okay.
Yeah, I agree. It can be another place.
I think there are probably a lot of places that have connections to the Force that these dark side users can tap into.
So, but why the mystery then? Why not just say it's this planet?
It might just be because it hasn't been named.
The planet itself has not been named.
Well, I just mean in the show.
Okay.
Because I think all the other places, it's like, we're going to Olega. We're going to Brendok. Like they've physically named them in the show. So it might just be because we're coming from
it's just a narrative choice.
A character's perspective in a lot of these situations that we're observing.
Yeah.
Might just be because it hasn't been explicitly stated by Qimir where we are.
Yes.
And also it's a mystery to May and Soul. Well, potentially
at
May.
least to Soul, and it's definitely a mystery to Osha. Like she wakes up, she's like, "Where am I?" Basically, Qimir's lair, pretty cool.
Yeah,
I thought it was pretty interesting
with his little hot tub. There's little bathtub.
Yeah. So first thing we get is we mentioned Soul showing his anger. That was kind of the next scene, but then it goes back to Osha following Qimir, and Qimir, very obviously is setting up this sort of lesson for Osha. He's put the ship far off. He's walking away where she could very easily follow him, leaves his saber for her. Like he's obviously trying to lure her into this. Basically what comes into like a dark side seduction that happens often in Star Wars. Bit weird that he's just got no clothes on in Star Wars. That's a first, and it was a little bit strange. Was it not? I mean,
yeah, it was a little off-putting, but it also kind of speaks to he's making himself the most vulnerable that I guess he could be. Because let's be honest, like when she's standing there with his lightsaber and he's unarmed, disrobed, all of that stuff. Like he's not really vulnerable. We know he's pretty powerful,
he's very powerful.
But it's the appearance of vulnerability.
Yes. And maybe trying to coax that vulnerability out of Osha as well.
Maybe, and maybe just to test, like, is she willing to attack him in that state?
Interesting.
Because that would speak a lot to her. character.
He's basically trying to see, what am I working with here?
I would think so.
How far am I going to have to go in trying to coax the dark side out of her? Like, is she just going to want to strike me down,
Right.
or am I going to have to really push a little bit here?
Yeah. How easily can we get to that anger?
Yeah, interesting. So you had mentioned when watching, and it's a great observation, I want you to take the lead on it. You'd mentioned that it's very different, the approach that Qimir is taking with Osha than with May.
Oh, well, my first impression was, Osha gets to see Chimir's face. Like, May didn't even know that Qimir was Qimir, the
Sure.
master, the her
stranger
master,
is
the
what he's
stranger,
called, yeah.
in the situation. So I feel like May kind of approached it from like a fear perspective. Like her interactions with him were very much like, if I don't do this, he's going to kill me.
Right.
Whereas now it seems like Qimir is trying to almost relate to Osha on a level of their experiences.
Sure.
And he's also got to, he can't wear his mask anymore. Osha knows who he is.
Yeah.
She's seen his face. She's seen what he's done. And he kind of has to get past that as well. Like, he murdered her friends.
Yeah. Killed Jackie.
Oh my gosh.
Yord, again, we can kind of understand when he's like, well, Yord was going to turn you in for a crime you didn't commit. I was like, yeah, I felt very justified again in my Yord hate. But Jackie, although, he had an answer for that too. He was just like, she would have turned out just like everyone else in the Jedi Order who you love but won't love you back, which is a really
That's
interesting way of describing that.
Yeah. Well, and her response was she's not as easily corrupted as her sister.
Yeah.
Right. Which is,
yeah.
I guess, not being in one-sided or unrequited love situations
yeah.
makes you corruptible. Is that what she's implying? It's
I
just a
don't
very
know.
interesting point that she's
Maybe it's that
dancing around.
Maybe it's that she understood what Qimir was trying to do. Maybe she understood that he was trying to test her or draw this dark side, and so that was why she said it's not going to be as easy with me as it was with my sister, because May does seem to exhibit more of the dark side more naturally, I guess, than Osha. But I want to call it back to that clip that I played out of context, Ben Gager. Need I remind you, sir?
You are on this council, but we do not grant you the rank of master.
Oh, me and Ben had a great time talking this week about this last episode, but that's neither here nor there. But need I remind you that there was that scene where Sol was interviewing, we're calling him, what do we call him? Starfish guy. And he said that he sensed a darkness in Osha. And I do think that much like this planet being called a mystery planet or unknown planet or whatever, I think that was one of those things that we as an audience were not supposed to have the answer to yet. But it does go back, this darkness has always kind of been inside of Osha. And we'll save for speculation about, what we think is going to ultimately be Osha's fate. But I've certainly got some ideas. I really, really do. Let's keep talking through. I love his lightsaber, by the way. Qimir just has a really cool lightsaber. I really like it. All right, so let's keep talking about Osha and Qimir. She asked, "Did you kill Sol? What about May?" And he mentioned that it was interesting.
You're asking about Sol first.
Yeah.
Well, and arguably, she thought May was, not even alive up until a few
true.
episodes ago.
Yeah, I guess
So-
that's true. She just only found out she was alive, so it's like, well, if she's dead again, I mean,
She's probably more attached to Sol.
yeah. And Qimir mentioned this relationship between master and pupil.
Oh my gosh.
Is a special one.
I mean, that was an interesting reveal when he got to the point where he's saying my Jedi master. Hey, by the way, I was
a Jedi. Let's talk about that. Yeah. Yeah, let's talk about that.
And my master basically betrayed me. Which, you can see that he's trying to draw parallels here and be like,
Yes.
guess what's going to happen to you?
Yeah,
Or maybe has
Interesting.
already happened to you and you just
Right.
don't know it
exactly.
because you don't know the whole story.
Exactly. And it's very interesting the way that works. So Qimir is a Jedi, or he was a Jedi.
Was, yeah.
Now, we've definitely got some suspicions as to what's going on there, and we're going to get to them when we speculate.
Okay.
But we'll hold off till that's how we're trying to do it. Cameron's been training me to hold off on the speculation to try to get through what we've all seen. Maybe everybody's forming their own opinions right now. We'll speculate here in a bit.
Well, and it sounds like part of his betrayal has to do with that scar on his back.
It definitely does, and we're gonna get that. He's carrying scars, both you know, physically and mentally, presumably from his master. But that said, there was something I was going to say about the pupil, the master, him being a Jedi. I think it's escaped me, but I guess we'll talk about it more whenever we get to speculating. Now, there was this line whenever, and by the way, it was during this time that we realized something very key about this episode that had us both go, oh, and we were like, oh, okay, this episode just got way more interesting. So it's coming. If you're not already in the like, wow, that was wild. It's coming. I promise. So there was this interesting conversation with Qimir talking to Osha when she was talking about soul being powerful. Qimir says, that's your power.
Yeah.
What is that? Like, I don't understand how to take that line.
I don't know.
Is he saying that is there something special about Osha specifically?
Ooh, or is it the power of two, like by her being with him?
Yes, and that's what Qimir says that he's after.
Because that was the master and the pupil, and so having the two, you have the power of two.
Yes,
there.
yes.
So
the
it's
power of two.
her power as well.
The power of many. But the power of one, the power of two, the power of many. This speaks also to the rule of two by the Sith. So this could be further fleshing the rule of two out. There's obviously the idea that Darth Bane presented, which it's canon, but it's shaky as to how much of the rule of two, I guess, necessarily is canon. But the idea being that, there's a master to hold the power and the apprentice to crave it. And it essentially just keeps the Sith from infighting, which is why there's only two of them, but because there's two and the apprentice is always trying to overtake the master, the power is always expanding, and so it's a great idea, but it also might speak to this idea of there being power between a master and a pupil, and that when Soul is at his most powerful, it's because Osha, his pupil, is present. It's almost like there's this saying that I've heard recently. It says that there is no greater power under the sun than the agreement of two people. And so this idea of like, if two people go after something, take this podcast, like, I can have this idea for a podcast and it's one thing. But the second that Cameron was like, I'm in, oh, now we're doing it. Now it's a real thing.
You
and
spur each other on.
Exactly.
The whole iron sharpens iron.
Exactly.
Thing.
And so I think maybe that's what he might be getting at.
Yeah, well, and you mentioned that it just seems like two is the sweet spot. Like once you involve many, things get a little more complicated.
That's interesting. Yeah.
So two might just be that sweet spot here for the power.
There's even like the symbolism of, hey, here, great episode to talk about this, being married, like the idea of two coming together and creating something so much more. There's like the symbolism of the ring, which yes, it's unity, but it's also like infinity. There's that symbolism in the opening where the two rings come together. And so there's a lot of that idea that seems to be fleshed out. So maybe it's not necessarily that Osha is ultra powerful, more just that when two come together, that it creates something more powerful.
Right. Well, and you got somebody watching your back too.
Yeah. Now, and we'll kind of speculate a little bit to this in here in a second, but it's like when Soul comes to the island, presumably that's, where he's heading. That's why at the end of the episode, he turns off the communicator and hits it right before Vernestra pulls in.
Yeah, because he doesn't want to get sent back to the temple to have a conversation about what's been going on.
He knows he's not going to be allowed to go back out. He knows
it
that
looks
he has
bad.
one chance to go get Osha. And so it's going to be interesting when Soul does show up. The power of two, what way is that going to go? Is it going to be May and Osha? Is it going to be Osha and Qimir? Is it going to be Soul and Osha? Is it going to be Soul and May? Is it going to be May and Qimir? It's really interesting. You'll have two masters, two pupils. Who's pairing up?
Oh.
We'll talk about it. But okay, very, very cool. So at that point, we get Vernestra. Oh, there's also a duet with Qimir.
Do it, like strike me.
Yeah. Now here's something we can talk about real quick. Qimir asks, "Why aren't you a Jedi?"
Oh, because that was when he was trying to draw her out to attack him.
And she said, and that's when she lights the saber. She says, "Because I failed." What happened?
Yeah, there's a lot of emphasis on, like, is Osha a Jedi or not? Why does she still identify with the Jedi when she left?
And again, I do want to point it out. After this episode, I feel a little less certain about some crazy claims that I've pondered. I'll say this. I believed Qimir was the Sith Lord.
Oh, yeah.
I had also suggested that perhaps Indara was somehow involved in the Sith and maybe she's not dead, which still could be true. But after this episode, it feels a little different. Like I don't understand where Qimir has gotten his training from. It could be that there is another Sith and he is a Sith. It could be that they're trying to form this other offshoot of the Sith. There's a lot of different things. I'm also wondering if perhaps Qimir got a hold of a Sith holocron. Perhaps something from long ago. Perhaps something from Knights of the Old Republic, which I know is one of Leslie Headland's favorite things, much like it is one of mine. And I know that she's mentioned bringing some stuff that she likes from the EU. So could we get a holocron of Darth Revan? And could that be where Qimir, who was, by the way, a former Jedi turned Sith, could that be where Qimir is receiving his instruction from? So that he is in the lineage of the Sith, but perhaps he's not one of the proper two Sith Lords, and maybe there are other Sith Lords like Darth Tenebris, Darth Plagueis out there, Darth Indara, whatever. But like, I'm just wondering, it could be like a quote unquote an offshoot. There's been a lot of speculation on whether he's a Knight of Ren, and there's definitely some similarity there, but I don't see it going that way. It feels like we're dealing with a very Sith Jedi type thing. I don't know. I know I went off on a tangent there.
No, very interesting.
I find it all to be incredibly interesting. I can't wait for... Come on, Cameron, come back, man. Let's talk about it. Yeah, so we don't know what her failure is, Osha's failure that she speaks about, but it's obvious that it's still a big part of her. And I think that this next episode is going to be all about facing the past.
Well, and a lot of the previous episodes kept bringing up the fact that she couldn't let go of her losses. And that has always been her wound, according to Yord.
Yeah, very
Rest
interesting.
in peace, Yord.
Yeah, and then even Jecki, we rejoice whenever one becomes one with the Force. And it's like, it's an honor to see someone become one with the Force. And then like, she dies and it's like, is it though?
Is it?
Like, that's okay. All right. Interesting. Let's talk about Vernestra, and then we're going to get into some speculation. So Vernestra has kind of been handling this other side of the investigation. She's at the Jedi Temple. She's got a Jedi whose name I can't remember, who's sort of acting as almost like a liaison, trying to, get her or figure out what's going on at the planet. What is it? Kofar. And, she mentioned that she wants to go herself. And by the way, just 'cause I saw it on my note, I don't want to forget, Sol did say it's time for me to face the High Council to tell them everything.
Gonna talk to them.
That's just, I think, foreshadowing to us. First off, I don't think he's gonna make it to the High Council. Sorry. But it's foreshadowing to us that he's ready to tell everything that happened. We will get the answers to what happened on Bryndock next week. At least we'll get another point of view.
Right. Well, you see all his inner turmoil as he's considering these things.
So as Vernestra, to just tie this Vernestra loop up, as she is ready to go, the Jedi mentioned, but you don't like to go out because you get sick. She goes, I don't get sick. I find it unsettling. And then just after that, she says, I need to handle this personally. Interesting that she doesn't like to travel out. She likes to stay at the Jedi Temple. Also interesting that it's getting to a level that she must handle personally.
Well, I mean, when you send out a team of Jedi and like most of them don't come back. At that point, you got to clean up the mess.
Yes. So we find then all these, dead bodies, which was really intense to just show, Jackie with her eyes open, Yord with her eyes open.
Yeah, they really wanted to
They're
re-traumatize me.
decaying bodies. I mean, it was rough. And whenever that happened, Vernestra mentioned something to tip the scales. And when she said that line, it almost felt to me like she was recalling something that she had heard.
Yeah.
Like it didn't seem like she was like, it didn't seem like she was just coming up with those words, more that she was recalling. Someone had told her that something to tip the scales would happen. I'm trying to remember that line was in a trailer. I don't think it's been said in this show, but I could be wrong. But she was definitely referencing it. I don't know who it was that said it. Listeners, if it has been said and you know, shoot us an email or call in. But yeah, and then right after that the Jedi that's with her said, "Who else could be this powerful?" Because basically he was suggesting that Soul did it.
Right.
And I think that, guys, I think that's it for Soul. I don't think the Soul's coming back from this one.
Well, and you called it that he would be blamed.
As we were watching it, I was thinking, oh, they're going to blame Soul for this. We'll save it. We're getting close to speculation. Now I'm starting to speculate.
But we haven't even talked about like May.
Okay, well, we'll talk about May. So who else would be this? He asked, who else could be this powerful? And I feel like Vernestra gives a knowing look. So again, we'll speculate on that. Tie this up, then we'll talk with May. Qimir said whenever, she goes to put the mask on, some form of, when you do, like, only what you take with you will be there. So it's very similar to what Yoda told Luke on Dagobah as he entered the dark side cave. And so it's interesting that Qimir is giving Osha the same lesson that Yoda gave Luke. Wild.
It's a teaching or corruption.
Interesting. All right, so May. We'll talk about May.
Well, because she's running around Soul's ship this whole time.
Right.
Pretending to be Osha, impersonating her sister.
Yeah.
And this little Basil creature is sniffing her out the whole time, like a little detective. Like something doesn't smell right. Following her around, which eventually is the reason that she gets caught. It seems like Basil notifies Soul finally, hey, this is not Osha.
Yeah.
But in the sequence of events that happen, she resets Pip.
Yes.
The factory setting.
This was like the moment that Kayla just lost it.
Killed her sister's best friend over here. Like, that's not going to win you any points with Osha.
Listen, there's a backup. There's got to be a backup.
I'm hoping there is. But man,
Come
it happens
on.
so fast. Like, all these deaths in the show. Just Jackie and just Yord. And then now Pip.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it could be that there is no backup. It could be that Pip is, that's it for Pip.
No, I don't. No one's ever really gone.
Rest in peace, Pip. Rip Pip. Let's get that hashtag going. Rip Pip. Okay.
But then it closes out with Soul and May together after she's been, stunned, waking up.
Yep.
We're going to have a conversation that he's been thinking about for years and years. Like, what could he possibly have been replaying in his mind for years and years if he had the chance to speak to her? What would he say?
Speak
and
to
how
her,
does that have
person.
to do? Yeah, how does that have to do with accepting what happened?
It definitely doesn't. Yeah, Soul is full of it. And he had me fooled a bit too. I had speculated in earlier episodes that it seemed as though Soul was the one person that had actually made peace, but arguably now I would say that Soul might be the most dangerous, because what's more dangerous than someone that hasn't made peace with their past? Someone who believes that they have made peace with their past.
Yes.
Like, that's when you're really in trouble.
Because then you don't know how that's going to manifest.
Yes, exactly. And then it comes out in all these kind of, yes, man, what a heavy lesson. It's really interesting. Okay, are you ready to jump into speculation?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Difficult to see. Always in motion is the future. Meditate on this. I will.
So as we were watching together this morning, again, we didn't catch it on the first time. Kudos to you if you did. Maybe your third eye is a little bit more open than mine. Maybe your tinfoil hat
on a little straighter.
was a little straighter, yeah. But all right, let's just start with the big thing. Kayla, who's Qimir's master?
Okay.
Who was his former Jedi master?
So you had mentioned, maybe it's Indara, right? Because we've got the potential that, and all the rumors going around, maybe she didn't die. My take on it, with all of the flashes over to Vernestra and her reaction, I'm like, It's Vernestra.
It's Vernestra.
It's got to be Vernestra.
Vernestra is Chimir's master.
Gotta be.
They made a point to show her using her whip. You saw the shape of it. Now look at the shape of Chimir's scar. Qimir is Vernestra's former Padawan, which is why whenever, again, it was all hazy back then. When Vernestra in the I believe it was the 4th episode was watching May fight, or it was the Ki-Adi-Mundi episode. I think it was the 4th episode where she was watching May fight. She said a Jedi trained her. It's easy to see.
Yeah.
And I was like, is it because it's Indara's style? And there's still something weird with Indara. Don't get me wrong. We're going to find out more next week about Indara, I would predict. But no, it's because it's Vernestra style. Because Vernestra trained Qimir and Qimir trained May, which is why when Vernestra watches, she's like, it's easy to see. Of course it's easy to see for Vernestra because it's her style. So Vernestra gave Qimir the scar. We do not know what happened. A lot like, by the way, we don't know what happened on Brindock.
Right.
And next week, I believe, is going to be all about clarifying all of those things. So, yes, Chimir's master was Vernestra. It all makes sense now.
Yeah, and I wonder if the situation where him leaving the Jedi was kind of like a Luke with Ben Solo kind of situation.
So there's this idea of sort of like unreliable narratives, and this show, much like The Last Jedi, has been making a lot of use of that. There are multiple interpretations of the same event. We see it happen on Brindock. Now we're going to see it happen between Vernestra and Qimir. And again, it ties back into this whole idea of the way these titles are working, that they transform into each other, and that one person's justice is another person's vengeance. And not only does point of view, meaning from person to person, does it change, but from time to time it changes. Think of us in our real lives. The way that you remember an event is likely very different from the way it happened. I like to use this phrase a lot of times. Everyone's the hero in their own story. And if you're not careful, you're the hero of your story, and then there's all these villains in your story. But you got to remember, there are your villains, quote unquote, they're the hero in their story. So there's always this like differing point of view that's happening. And so, it seems to me like that's the lesson that we are getting. And, I don't know, and this might be frustrating to some people, I don't know if we're going to get what actually happened. I don't know that there is a what actually happened. I think that there's probably a lot of like half-truths. This person saw that, they thought this was happening, so they reacted this way. But really what was happening is something different. And if this person had known that, they would not have acted that way. But because we are not seeing the full picture, we just find ourselves just embattling all the time. It's very real world. Take any like politics. You got one side over here and one side over there. And they're both just seeing different things. And so this side sees this side and goes, well, they're clearly wrong. And this side does the same to this side. But ultimately, it's probably more like we all want the same thing, yet we see it differently, and it's difficult to expand your point of view out to see what the other person is seeing, and it causes all of this friction. I think that's what's happening here. It seems that way. Sure. But Vernestra was totally Chimir's master.
Yeah.
And when we both looked at each other, we were like, Vernestra! It's Vernestra! It was like, okay, now we're in. And when you rewatch it with that in mind, or you continue watching with that in mind, it's really interesting, because then that means that when Vernestra comes upon those dead bodies, she knows it's Qimir. Yeah. And honestly, when she says, this is something I have to handle personally, she knows it's her fault. Mm-hmm. She knows that she has some role in it. Mm-hmm. She was, by the way, she was talking to Soul. How could you? How could you possibly, this was the 4th episode, how could you have let this child, if you knew that they were out there, how could you have not brought it to the order? How could you have not? Dude, she's just projecting.
Yeah.
Because she did the same thing with Qimir. It's so messed up, man.
Right. Oh, and then when we realized that it was Vernestra that
Yeah.
was his master, not, Indara, like
Right.
maybe was speculated previously. It's like, well, then why was he going along with all this stuff with May? Like, what was this vendetta he was encouraging against these particular Jedi?
Your speculation here is right on.
My thoughts are, Vernestra may have been holed up in the Jedi Temple for who knows how long because
She's
she
been
gets
holed up
unsettled traveling through hyperspace.
because of whatever happened between
Who
her
knows?
and Qimir.
Who knows how long she's been, holed away,
Yep.
hiding. And I think that this whole situation, killing these Jedi, has been a ploy to draw her out.
You're totally right. It's all been an effort to draw out Vernestra so that Qimir can get his justice. / vengeance. That's what the entire story has been about. What?
Gives me chills.
Come on, it's so good. It's like it's one of those things. It's like, how could we not see it? I mean, we didn't have all the puzzle pieces.
No.
But man, this show, I have not read any reviews. Maybe everyone else is talking about the same thing that we're talking about. It could be. Which, by the way, if you think that this is good and you enjoy having Kayla on, how about write a nice little review? Do some 5 stars. So maybe if these kinds of conversations are not bubbling to the top of fandom, maybe they could start to. So if you want to help us out, you can do that. That's the pitch. All right. So back to this. So I don't know if that's what everyone's saying, but, this is brilliant. It's brilliant writing. And, Leslie was a writer on this episode. And it really is because she is just parsing out these small breadcrumbs. And I've seen a lot of people in fandom, media, whatever, sort of suggesting that this show is not... It's not an engaging mystery. Yes, it is.
Gosh.
You don't even know. We have not even had it on our radar. Yeah. We thought that this was all about May getting vengeance against the Jedi.
Well, and then Osha getting vengeance, maybe.
Yes, but it's actually, it's not that it's not that. But
it's
truly,
also,
it's Qimir getting vengeance on Vernestra, and none of us had it on our bingo card. Yet we're sitting here saying that I've heard people, it's such an unfulfilling mystery. It's not a murder mystery. We know who killed him. We didn't know jack. And they are just, every episode, just a little bit more. Really, I think that if I were to go back, every single episode, what actually is going on, I feel like I gathered a little bit more. And every week it's been that way. There has not just been one week where it's like, here it all is. It's been very little pieces spread throughout. And man, it's been so satisfying. And again, everyone is, of course, you can have your opinions and you can talk about all this stuff. But I really think it's more about, are we paying attention to what the story is actually doing? And to me, to get to the 6 of 8, and again, we're sort of making a big speculation here that Vernestra is, but I mean, I feel as comfortable making this speculation as I did after episode 2, saying that Qimir was, the Sith, the stranger.
I'm very happy to wear the tinfoil hat with you on this one.
Okay, but like, we're 6 out of 8 episodes in. Even that requires a good bit of speculation. But that said, it does seem like that's what's happening. And to go that far into a series before the true motives and the true mystery, the mystery behind the mystery, come on, man. It's so cool. Which, again, it's very funny. One of the opening lines of the Tao Te Ching is mystery upon mystery. And that's exactly what's happening. This episode, this show,
it's Inception.
It's like an Inception. It's mysteries upon mysteries upon mysteries. Yeah. That is this life. That is our existence. That is the Acolyte. It's so cool, man. Yeah. I'm like riding high on it. And I did not expect to feel this way after watching the episode one time. Yeah. Sometimes we just need to take it through. Watch it again. Sometimes there's more than what might would meet the eye, and this show is nothing if not more than meeting the eye. Mm-hmm. How about you? Are you feeling like this mystery is sort of expanding? Like,
Sure.
what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I'm having more speculative thoughts
Yes.
as I sit here. I'm like, oh my gosh.
We're in speculation, so.
Like, oh my gosh, what if it's all Soul's fault?
Oh,
And
expand.
that's like, what if everything that happened on Brindok was instigated by something that Soul did?
Interesting.
And he's been carrying the weight of that. And that's why he got so close to Osha to kind of assuage his ultimate guilt over being the instigator of the events that, I guess, killed all of her family.
That's interesting. He's trying to atone
Yeah.
for.
Not to say that he was the only player, but I wonder if something that he did set everything off.
It'd be interesting if the word atonement shows up in either the next episode title or the last episode. I could see that. I could see atonement being something that they go to, because it seems like he is seeking that.
I feel like anything's on the table.
And again, there was earlier, I mentioned that Vanessa was just talking to herself whenever she told Soul, like, how could you do this thing?
Oh, yeah.
Which she totally was. Now that we know
Definitely.
that Qimir was Vanessa's Padawan.
Had to be.
That said, let's also look at Soul. Whenever he is holding Osha on that ship after the third episode, what does he say to her? You will never feel this way again. He's
And then-
talking to himself.
Well, and then, like, fast forward to last episode. Oh, all of her Jedi family dead, except for him.
Well, not yes, that is true. But then,
she doesn't feel like that.
Again, it's multiple meanings. Like, she now is feeling that way again. But I'm saying that what you're suggesting is that Soul carries this grief because maybe everything that happened on Brindok was his fault.
Like, singularly.
Singularly,
As
it's
an
his
initiator.
fault. Then,
Whether it was intentional or not, I'm not saying it was
Exactly.
intentional.
We'll find
I think
out.
it was purely accidental.
Yes, we'll find out. But I'm just saying that he was talking to himself as much as he was talking to her when he said, you will never feel this way again. And unfortunately, I think that it has cost him. He has avoided those feelings and he stuffs them down. Qimir asks, what do you do with your darkness? I'll tell you what Soul does with his darkness. He stuffs it down. And there was a line in the bios when me and Cameron were breaking down the week before the Acolyte came out, when we were doing some final speculation and breaking some different things down, which, by the way, we did not speculate any of this. This is wild. But no, one of the things that they said about Soul is that he relies on his Jedi training to keep his emotions at bay. Right. And that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to keep his emotions at bay. He's trying to ultimately control his emotions. Which ones am I going to let myself feel? Which ones am I going to stuff down? Yeah. And we're going to see, this is the speculation, you're going to see that it doesn't work. You can't do that. And Soul is going to ultimately pay a price. And it's probably, here's my speculation, it's going to cost him his life. It will cost him his life.
Confrontation between Soul and Osha?
I could see that. I could see that. So let's speculate about that. Qimir and Osha. Okay, how about this? There are going to be 4 people meeting on that planet. And I do predict that Vanessa will finally show up.
Oh, yeah.
And I think we'll talk about that some more. But of the 4, May, Osha, Qimir, and Soul, what's the pairing going to end up being?
Oh, gosh.
I'll go first. I think it's going to be Qimir and Osha, and then it's going to be May and Soul.
Well, I think Qimir is finally going to tell Osha the quote-unquote truth, which kind of reveals that this person that she's trusted for so long, Soul, has been lying to her the whole time.
Yep, I think you're right about that.
I mean, he might say, well, I got this from May. Maybe she won't believe it. I don't know. But I think that's kind of what we're being set up for.
I think you're right.
May to hear Soul's truth and maybe reckon with it with her own. Yeah. And then Osha to hear what Qimir has to say about what happened, really impacting her allegiance to Soul, which has been blind allegiance in a lot of ways.
Yes. And I think that it's going to ultimately that sort of that distrust and it seemed like semantics at the time, but when we did our episode 3 breakdown, one of the things I said is like, you can see that Soul is lying to Osha during that test. And he's lying so that the truth will come out. But you can't do that. You can't use a dark thing for a light outcome. And I think that ultimately that's going to come back around. It was literally the moment they met, he started lying to her. And what's going to end up happening is that those little lies along the way are going to go over these 16 years they've been together. And next week, or depending on if it's a full flashback episode, then fine, the week after, Sol and Osha are going to be confronted. And whenever that happens, all of those lies are going to finally come to the surface, and Sol is going to reap what he's been sowing all these years by telling Osha these lies. And unfortunately, I believe that Osha is going to take the lies of Sol, equate them with the lies of the Jedi, and then equate them to the lies of the light side. And so what's going to happen is she will embrace the dark, and I think that Osha ultimately is going to become the Acolyte, and that the season is going to end with Qimir and Osha together.
What happens to May? Because we're talking about the power of two right now, you know. I don't know that there's room for a third wheel in this situation.
Anything that I have to say about May would be less like what I just kind of gave. Feels like narratively the lesson that Leslie is sort of weaving into the show as best as I can pick it up. I see that that's what's going to happen with Osha. That makes sense.
Yeah.
With May, I'm a little less clear on what is going to happen with her.
Well, because we know throughout this whole season, Osha has not chosen May. Osha has been actively trying to get away from May, separate herself from May, and May has just been trying to draw her back and recognize their connection, their bond, their thread.
It's entirely possible that, that Osha kills May.
Oh, man, that would be tragic.
It would be tragic. It's entirely possible, though.
I really hope not. And in my mind, okay, so I don't
not.
know that this is going to happen. Probably not in this season. I could see it going your way, like the way that you just described. Maybe season 2 touching on some other things. Maybe May trying to rescue Osha, that kind of thing.
Okay, yes.
But my ultimate ending goal would be for May and Osha to be together.
I think you're right. So, and that was an original speculation. You're bringing it back up. So let's do this.
Okay.
If I were to make a prediction based off of everything that I've seen, because what I said about Osha and Sol, all these lies and all this stuff coming to a head, I think that that's ultimately what's going to happen with Qimir and Vernestra too.
Yeah.
My speculation is Vernestra ends up on the island. Sol ends up on the island. May, by default, is also on the island. I think May ultimately will run away. I think that
That's what she's been doing the whole time.
Yeah. she's been resisting the call. And so she's going to continue to resist that call. This is not her season, quote unquote. And so that's going to go away. Now, just for clarity, Leslie wrote this story to be told in one season. She has ideas for season 2, but she says that there will be a conclusion. So I think that May could sort of just be almost like a loose thread to some degree. So she escapes with the ultimate, like, if we get more seasons, the ultimate story will be May and Osha reuniting together. I do think that ultimately will happen, that there will be a reconciliation between the light and the dark, that there is light in the dark and there is dark in the light, and that those two sides might switch a couple of times. So, yes, I think Qimir and Osha will ultimately kill their former masters, and they will become 2.
Yeah.
That sounds right.
There's also a world where May and Osha get together and kill everyone with their power.
Could happen.
Just blow everybody
Could
away.
happen. But I would hate to see Qimir not get more screen time.
Me too.
And B, I just think it's so much more satisfying if Osha follows Qimir, and that both Osha and Qimir get their justice vengeance on Sol. And it sucks because Sol at the beginning, man, I mean, he was like one of my favorite Jedi in a long time.
He's a complex character.
He's a complex character, and the cracks have really started to show in his character. And, in my opinion, Qui-Gon Jinn, He is not. Which, by the way, let me real quickly say this. Before we started talking about the episode, I'd given this idea of like, let people have their opinions and let them, there's a deleted scene, and this probably led to this kind of thinking in my mind this week. There's a deleted scene from The Phantom Menace where little Anakin is fighting a young Greedo. And Qui-Gon breaks up the fight, and as he's talking to Anakin, he says, why are you fighting him? Anakin says, because he says that I cheated. And Qui-Gon says, did you? And Anakin says, no, I didn't cheat. And he goes, then you know the truth. No need to fight. It's a great lesson. That's a better way of saying what it was I was trying to say. So go watch that deleted scene. And if there's someone that disagrees with you about the Acolyte, you know the truth. And what I mean by the truth, I'm not saying that you're ultimately right, that I'm ultimately right. It's like,
if we're learning anything from this series.
You're enjoying it and you're getting something out of it that doesn't, whatever they might say, doesn't impact what you're getting out of it. So just don't let it. Anyways, a little Qui-Gon action there. Qui-Gon Jinn, to me, the model Jedi, always says the right stuff. I find no fault in his words. So, starting to see the cracks. So, it sucks because it seems like he had so much great intention. But what would be nice, and I'm usually against this, but I'm going to retract. It would be nice for him to be...
Oh no! Are you going to say it? It would be nice
for him to be redeemed and then killed.
I was just thinking about the redemption through death situation.
At the end of it, he's sort of like, maybe he's fighting with Osha and they're literally blade to blade, and he says, you know what? I was wrong. And he deactivates his blade and she cuts right through and takes him down. That would be a fitting end for Soul.
Tragic.
It really would. So we'll see.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, I'm so excited about the prospect of redemption without death in this series.
No, there's going to be some death. I mean, this show has been nothing
so
but
much
death.
death.
There's going to be some death. There's going to be some redemption, though. I think Soul will be redeemed.
Well, I think May, too.
I think you're right.
I think May as well.
May's not going to die, I don't think. I think they let May live. But I think Vernestra...
Oh, yeah.
Young Vernestra here. I think she's going to be gone.
Oh, man.
Soul, I think he's going to be gone. Osha might live to see another season.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would think so.
Any more further speculation? I mean, we could probably sit here for hours and speculate about this show.
Not enough?
It's been great. But thanks for coming on the pod.
Yeah.
It was fun talking.
It's actually been kind of nice.
Don't be a stranger now.
Oh, okay.
Maybe you can come back.
I'll be like right out here. I always listen.
She's always right over there, y'all. I mean, she's always a part of the podcast. But I enjoyed having you on, and it's good to know we've got a nice man. Now I'm picturing this: the power of one, the power of two, the power of many. Now I'm picturing, we've been lucky enough, of course, like me and Cam, like we keep this thing going every week. It's so much fun. But then we've had you on, we've had our friend Jim on, and now I'm picturing the power of many. Yeah. All four of us getting on a podcast, and maybe we can do a special post Acolyte, like after the final episode. Maybe all four of us can come together and spitball different ideas. The power of many, it would be really cool. So I enjoyed having you on.
And Ben can call in.
Hey, Gager.
You're on this council, but we do not grant
That's
you the
funny.
right.
I feel like it's a weird week when we don't have Ben calling in.
Gager needs to get on this show. He had a great insight the other day, or we were texting about. He had mentioned that the way that. So in the end of the fourth episode, whenever Qimir force pushes everyone and it creates that little pattern on the ground there, he was like, it bothered me all week, and he sent me a picture. And when I saw the picture, I like instantly knew what he was going to say, just because I know Gager so well. And I was like, the hand of Saruman. And then he, like, as I said it, he typed the hand of Saruman. He's like, yes, I'm not crazy. No, Gager, you're not crazy, man. It does seem like Qimir, if there is some foreshadowing there, Saruman was working for a darker force. And so maybe perhaps Qimir is working for a darker force. And I don't know, it could be that. So Gager's got his third eye open. He's not crazy. At least he's no more crazy than I am. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure at some point he's going to end up sitting on this couch. And maybe one of these days we'll get a bunch of us in here. I think it'd be fun. The after party to me. It's of course more than one person for sure. It's arguably more than two. I think what's fun about this is just getting as many perspectives on, which is why we always encourage Collins. Just because I think that rambunctious sort of party, that's ultimately where I would love to see this podcast go.
And
so
spurring each other on, and speculation and excitement.
So
with
as
ideas.
the pod grows and we get more listenership, and which it has been. Thank y'all so much. As that grows, perhaps maybe we'll even take this to a slightly larger room and get a few more microphones in and get some more folks in. I think it would be fun. I mean,
speculation about Star Wars After Party.
Speculation about Star Wars After Party. Yeah, because it's just so fun. Everybody brings a slightly different flavor. It's the best. It's great. So all that to say, thanks for coming on, and
thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was fun, and I bet people are going to hear more from you in the future. So luckily you're right there.
You'll hear more from KB137.
KB137. You'll hear from KB137 every episode. But yeah, it was a good time. If there's nothing further, you ready to close out?
Yeah, go ahead and land the ship.
All right, land the ship. We'll be right back next week. Hopefully Cameron will be with us. I mean, there's, again, it's summer. It's a bit difficult, but it'll be me and somebody, and we're going to be talking about the Acolyte. We'll be talking about episode 7. I'm really excited. How about you? Are you excited for episode 7? Are you intrigued about what's going to happen?
I mean, I am now.
Yeah, I really feel like it's the same director. I think his name is, I'm going to butcher it. Is it Kodanaga? Something along those lines.
But the flashback director.
It's the flashback director.
Okay.
And so
That's
presumably that's what we're going to get.
I would like to see a flashback. I'd like to go back to Brendock and see from somebody else's
I think we're going to get it, and I'm excited. Until then, Tyler out.
Kayla out.
This party's over.